demonstrate your value, build your personal brand inside the company. Our performance is highly contextual. And right now, we are in the crisis situation. We're dealing with the pandemic. Well, it would be wonderful if my employees work for me 24/7, but are they as effective long-term? And how quickly will they burn out?
Hi, I'm Greg Mustreader, and this is my video podcast on rationality, transhumanism, productivity, and trends of development in society. Today, here with me is Sergey Gorbatov, an HR talent executive in a Fortune 100 company and a professor at the IE Business School in Madrid. Sergey has over 15 years of experience in a wide spectrum of roles in HR, in talent, leadership, and organization development. He is also a co-author of the book Fair Talk, 3 Steps to Powerful Feedback. Hi, Sergey. Thanks for joining me.
Hey, Greg. It's a pleasure to be here.
The first question I'd like to ask concerns the current state of affairs, so to say. Everybody, of course, is all the time speaking about the coronavirus and how this all affects all markets, including the career market. As a HR with a huge experience, what have you noticed? What is the biggest trend in HR right now?
That's a very big question. And I guess that depending on the company, depending on the industry, you will hear different answers. You know that there are certain industries, such as retail or internet deliveries, that actually are currently thriving, which we can't say about oil and gas or construction. So that's one small caveat. What the HR leaders, what my colleagues are concerned about, several issues. First, around maintaining engagement of their employees, enabling virtual work, making sure that the productivity stays at the pre-crisis level or even increases, so that we don't see big slumps in productivity. And everything that deals with virtual work, with enabling virtual teams, goes into that bucket. Second, re-entering the work. Getting back to the offices, to the new normal. What do you do? Do you test everyone? You don't test? What are the legal implications of that? What do you do with office cleaning and so on? How do you stage coming back to work? Is it shift A, shift B, or you go by percentages, 15%, 30%, 50%. That's the second one. And the third bucket, I would say everything that deals with talent and talent identification. We've seen that recently, people that we haven't paid much attention to in the organizations, they've risen in this difficult times, and they've demonstrated tremendous ability to perform and thrive in the ambiguous environment, while those who have been traditionally categorized as high potentials, demonstrating at best a medium level of performance. And second topic concerns the availability of the talent and the talent pools. So looking at the competitive environment. If I work for a company, hypothetically, that traditionally required people being in the office, and I continue requiring people coming to the office and not working from home, while my competitors are relaxing their practices on homework, it means that they might come after my talent who are not mobile and who may not have these opportunities within the company. So this talent war, I think, now will be shifting slightly, and the new perspective that we will see in this talent war is virtual work and the availability of talent who is not proximate to you.
Well, some interesting comments have been raised by you. Let's start with the productivity issue. you probably have some data on this for your own, for the company that you are working at, or for some other companies in the industry and in other industries. Has the level of productivity dropped or risen due to the remote work on average?
So I don't have data on that, so we can only speculate. First, we need to decide what productivity is. Is productivity output? And if we define productivity as output, then definitely the outputs globally have dropped. If we link productivity to business results, I'm pretty sure that many companies will be reporting drops in their earnings and their revenues. If you define productivity as effort put in, everyone now is talking about and writing about people working more, on average 2 to 3 hours more. So is that how we define performance and productivity? Depending how you answer that question, that will determine your approach to that.
But people working more does not necessarily mean that they are working more efficiently. Maybe they have more distractions, all those notifications on their cell phones.
Absolutely. Let's not confuse activity with productivity. It's easy to fall into this trap of efforting. And I make an effort. But then what if you've made a tremendous effort, and then because of the crisis, the contract got cancelled, or the client disappeared, the funding got cut? Does it mean that you haven't performed? That's one question. And the second one is a concern that many people are creating a lot of work because of crisis. And there is nothing more lethal than a leader in search of action, or a leader in search of crisis, and creating the opportunities to rise, sometimes using less than desirable means for that.
Less than desirable, such as?
Such as taking advantage of a crisis to advance personal agenda and create projects and activities that may not be in the best business interests.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I see. What about you yourself? How's working remotely affecting you? Do you have any life hacks on how to be productive while staying self-isolated?
Structure. That's definitely my way of dealing with that. And having regular one-on-ones with my team, having team meetings, setting in catch-ups with key stakeholders, and keeping those commitments. My team is distributed from Singapore to Chicago, so working virtually for me was normal. And that's why shifting to 100% homework was not as problematic. We were using lots of collaborative apps, video conferencing apps, and we just shifted completely to those. However, I've also seen examples of people really struggling, particularly those who've never worked from home, those who have small children, those whose families have been affected by COVID. And we really need to add this personal element to that. In any crisis, there will be human tragedy, and we would be amiss and maybe tone deaf if we don't take that into account.
Yeah, that's an important issue. The problem for many people who have now to stay home with their families, who may be the most important people in their lives, but who may still be a distraction from work and work process. Do you have any life hacks on how to manage that, how to distinguish between work and other stuff that happens in your apartment at home?
Be more forgiving. be more forgiving and accepting that now we have invited work into our homes. So make sure that it's normal. Introduce routines such as whenever a child walks into the camera, everyone waves at the child and says hi. And that takes this angst of, oh my God, my dog barks or whatever. It makes it normal. And just normalizing the process and saying that it's fine. We understand that there might be a delivery at the door and you may need to step out to take that, or that your child cries or your dog barks. That's fine and that's normal. It doesn't talk about you as a person, about your productivity. It's just how we live our lives. And that makes a huge difference. I have a small dog, and sometimes she starts playing with the ball or with her bone during the conference calls, and that makes noise. I would always pull her up and say, "Hey, say hi, everyone. This is my dog." You know, that's what can I do about her? She has lots of energy. So in making it more personal and demonstrating that you are a human being with lives outside of work makes it really more authentic, and you gain more trust because of that.
Well, being more authentic is a vital skill, I think, for many people in life generally, but in this situation especially. Thanks for the advice. Another question regarding the COVID is concerns what's happening overall on the job market, because we all know that there's a global financial crisis nowadays, in addition to a global healthcare crisis. Many companies lose their revenue, they have to fire people, some people are left jobless at the time, not as many open vacancies are on the market as there used to be in most industries. So what would you recommend aspiring white-collar employees who are afraid at the moment, who are afraid that they might lose their job or who have already lost their job, how to boost their competitiveness in these difficult times?
We can talk about two aspects here. One is the organizational aspect, and the second one is the personal aspect. Organizationally, okay. And here the science is conclusive, and the research has been confirmed and reconfirmed several times. During crisis, during economic downturns, those organizations that don't lay off their employees are doing better financially long-term when the economy recovers. Those organizations that do lay off employees and or furloughs or any measures like that suffer more lately. The market, in terms of stock price, never reacts positively to reactive layoffs. So if you are an organization, think about that. It's better to weather this crisis together with your employees rather than go for a short-term solution, because the economy is going to bounce back. But you will be known as an employer who would dispense of your people as the first resort. So don't come back to us saying that employees are your most valuable assets. Now, if we talk about the second perspective, and that is the perspective of the employee, my question is always, what's your plan B? And it's better to have this conversation 2 or 3 years before the crisis, and so that you have time to prepare. And now we see a lot of research that comes out on the benefits of hustling. So having a side hustle, if you have a day job and then you do something on the side, a podcast, or maybe you start your business, or you give classes, or you are a member of a board or at a non-governmental organization or your local school. So whatever it is that you are doing that's different to your day job. And by doing that, you learn to straddle, and you learn to acquire different skills, and you learn to gain different perspectives, and you learn to go out and network more and identify more opportunities. So people who do that are more prepared to weather crises, difficult situations, and they would bounce back and adapt much quicker to whatever life throws their way. And it may not be a layoff. It may be moving to a different country, or it might be a breakup or a divorce or a passing of a loved one. So what we know is that life will throw curveballs at us. And those who are more open to opportunities, those who learn in the times of thriving, they're better off in dealing with those curveballs. So if you come to me and say, well, I'm a white-collar person and I'm afraid that I might lay off, I would say, well, start doing something different. Start learning a new skill, read a book, get a hobby, find a side gig. It may not be, it's not necessarily a second job, right? Don't get me wrong. And you don't need to get paid for it. It's just acquiring experiences. And you also should not neglect your day job. Demonstrate your value. Build your personal brand inside the company. Make sure that your work is visible, and make sure that you focus on the right priorities for the company. Clearly articulate that you understand the business strategy and the current environment of the company, and link your daily activities to that. And continue being this organizational entrepreneur. Demonstrate that you can bring innovation, demonstrate that you can take charge, and demonstrate that you can voice any disagreements or concerns or support the ideas of others. Those are the key aspects of entrepreneurship today.
Well, I'm personally all for having a side hustle. All my blogs started as a side hustle in addition to my career in international legal consulting. After that, I left it. So I am a proponent of that. But some people would counter that by saying that having a side hustle leads to less energy, less focus in your main job. And you might become less competitive in the company that employs you. Wouldn't you agree with such people who say that it's better to exert more effort in their main job instead of just going for new projects?
I would not frame it as either or. I would say both and. And the argument that the proponents of hustling make, and the research confirms, is that both your key job and your side hustle positively reinforce each other. You might draw energy from one and put that energy into the other. If you are only focused on one thing and one thing only, it might consume you. And we've all heard about the cases of burnout, and that's when you're 150% in something. So having a hobby, having something on the side actually helps you to step back, to gain new perspective, to gain energy, and that will have a positive spillover effect into the other thing. There is an interesting research done by my friend Emilia Bunia, and if you're interested, you can go and Google her HBR article on serious leisure. And she studies hobbies and leisurely activities of CEOs of companies. So specifically focusing at that top job and what they do on the side when they're not at work. And her findings all point in the same direction, that those CEOs who engage in serious leisure activities are more effective in their daily jobs.
We'll give a link to that article in the description of the video, as usual.
Fantastic.
Do read this. Well, don't put your eggs in just one basket, as they say, right? What if your employer objects to your side projects? This is not uncommon, I think. What to do then? Should you do it like secretly?
What is your employer's promise to you? That how I often react to these type of statements in the coaching sessions with leaders that I have. And you might say, well, my employer promised me employment. You're laughing. That's a healthy reaction, because today no one can promise you anything. And if an organization promises you a career for life, that's not true. And we all know examples of organizations that would lay off thousands of employees the moment that the times get tough. So your relationship with the organization definitely should be that of mutual respect and being very clear that you are a valuable member of the organization as long as you produce results, as long as you contribute to the overall cause of the organization, and you should definitely do that. Yeah, do that. That helps your career. That helps your standing in the organization. And the more you produce and the more valuable you are to the organization, the more opportunities to grow and develop you'll get. So that's absolutely normal. It's beneficial, and that will lead to career success. If your organization tells you that you cannot do whatever you are doing, well, ask yourself, do you want to work for that company? And unless you work for a governmental agency or a defense company, when really you cannot disclose many things, and when really your public image can suffer and can really harm the company, those cases are rare, and those are special circumstances. But typically, most organizations are very supportive of that, and most of the organizations will have specific guidelines on how to lead your social media activity. You always should have a disclaimer that the opinions are yours, similar as to what I will have for this video. The opinions are mine and they're personal and not those of my employers or associated organizations. Don't keep that a secret. You will get into troubles. Honesty is best policy, and being transparent with your employer is the best thing to do. If your supervisor does not support your activities, I would have an honest conversation with the supervisor around professional development, around our relationship, and the reasons why. And typically, if you ask the supervisor on why, not much will have to be said. Because really, it's very difficult to argue a case that why your supervisor would have gardening as a hobby and you would have blogging as a hobby. If you are doing that outside of office hours on your own dime, you're not using company property. There are no reasons why you can't do that.
Well, in consulting, there are reasons, because employers would like their employees, the consultants, to work around the clock, to spend every waking hour, sometimes when there are difficult projects, and they are mostly all the time. So you are required to be focused, extremely focused, work 24/7. That's the objection in such companies. I know that for example, in an FMCG company, that wouldn't be a problem at all. Or in some Silicon Valley IT company, some of them support, as you said, side hustles.
Even if we talk about consulting companies, I can think of specific people, some of my ex-colleagues or friends who would go and get much higher salary and much better conditions with a consulting company if they have a blog, if they've written a book, if they have a model they've developed. So in consulting companies, you're more valuable to them if you've built your personal brand. I understand. And here we can talk about the levels at which you enter the organization, and of course, and your career ambitions, and how you see the world of work 24/7. Well, it would be wonderful if my employees work for me 24/7, but are they as effective long term? And how quickly will they burn out? Because they will burn out guaranteed. What do you want? What do you want from your career, and what sacrifice are you willing to make? And that's a much longer coaching conversation.
Mm-hmm. Well, I totally agree. I totally agree on burnout. I think I have spoken to many consultants in the big three companies, McKinsey, BCG, Bain, and in many consultants in legal consulting, where I worked for like 5 years, and most of them experienced burnout. So there must be something wrong with HR policies of many of those companies. I hope they are mitigating it and making it all better now, with time, realizing that it doesn't work long term. Okay, let's move to further topics. You're a great expert on giving meaningful and powerful feedback. You've written a great book about it, very insightful. I recommend it. The link is in the description below under this video. First of all, I'd like to start by asking why so much feedback is ineffective. You refer in your book, to a study, a meta-analysis done in 1996 that says that around 30% of feedback leads to negative consequences. So it leads to some detrimental effects even. How come?
And that's a fascinating finding, right? That feedback actually leads to a decrease in performance in nearly a third of cases. Why? Several reasons. First, not all feedback is the same. And you need to look at the message itself. Is the message fair? Is it clear? Is it focused? Does it address the most important performance issue? Is it vague? Is it baffling? Is it so sugar-coated that the real issue is not seen? And once we start unwrapping the feedback message, very often I see cases that, you're not telling the truth or not the entire truth, or you are adding so many details that the truth becomes irrelevant, or you are giving so much feedback. Particularly this is true with new supervisors. They would give feedback on 125 different things, all of which might be true, but then the employee is totally baffled. Okay, what do I focus on? Or you might give feedback on things that the employee cannot change. I can say, well, you know what, you need to be smarter. And we know that IQ, our intelligence, gets fixed at the age of 18 to 22. So after that, our general IQ level only decreases. So if I give you feedback, you need to be smarter, I might as well just give you feedback, well, you should be taller. That's not going to happen. Addressing the message and really crafting a powerful feedback message is the first step. And the other consideration is the context. Our performance is highly contextual. And right now, we are in the crisis situation. We're dealing with the pandemic. So the way how we do our work have changed. The standards have changed. The priorities have changed. So if you don't adjust your feedback message to the context, then you are really missing the opportunities to raise the level of performance of your employees. And it is my true belief that these contextual factors are not often taking into account. And if you are interested, I can also talk about the article that I co-authored with Linda Rodman, who's an executive coach, talking specifically about situational feedback. And I hope that we can also share that link to this video.
Yeah, I've read that article, the one with the sandwich analogy.
The sandwiches, yes.
Yeah, it was great. So tell us more about it.
So the key idea of the article is that we got the sandwich idea wrong. You know, the typical feedback sandwich when you tell someone a good thing about their performance, then the bad thing, and then you finish off with another good thing. Well, that rarely works because first, everyone knows about the feedback sandwich. So the moment you start telling something good, the positive feedback, they're already waiting for that middle piece. And other people hear the good thing, then they ignore the bad thing, and then they hear the good thing again, and then they think, okay, everything's fine, because you finished on the good thing. So really, it should be a buffet of sandwiches, and you need to tailor your feedback message to the situation, and you need to match your feedback to the situation correctly. And in the article, we provide a scale of different feedback sandwiches, and we use this metaphor that if the carbs is the form, the shape of feedback, the packaging, then the protein is the feedback message itself. And then you have a scale from totally positive message, which we call the English muffin with clotted cream and jam. So pure carbs, no protein whatsoever. Greg, you're so fantastic. Your blog is wonderful, and keep doing that. You're a star in your own right. So pure positivity. Then the second sandwich is this French baguette with cheese. So sumptuous, crusty bread, this beautiful French baguette, and a thin slice of cheese, which is the message. And it could sound like your presentation was great. There are a few things that I would reconsider next time, but it's not a big deal. Overall, great job. Then the third level, and we are increasing the intensity of the feedback message. So less packaging, more protein, more feedback. So the next level is this American turkey sandwich, which is your standard good, bad, good type of sandwich. The fourth level is the shrimp sandwich on rye, your Danish shrimp sandwich. So shrimp, lots of protein, and this is unacceptable. And the report that you've written really doesn't meet my expectations. Now let's put together a plan on how we get your performance back on track. So you finish with the rye, you finish with the support sentence, and then the final is Thai tiger cry. So beef, the king of protein, very spicy, no carbs at all. This is the third time this is happening. If you don't pull your act together, your future with the company is in question, and your employment might be terminated soon. And what we find in our research is that managers overwhelmingly use the scone with clotted cream and the French baguette as their primary feedback messages. So they know that they need to deliver the message to the employee, but they package it so thickly that the employee doesn't hear the message. The manager thinks that they've delivered the feedback, right? Because they did. And in research, psychologists call it the illusion of transparency. The manager thinks that they are transparent, and but the employee doesn't hear the feedback. And then on the 11th hour, the employee asks, well, why am I getting fired? Well, because of this, this, and that. But then the employee says, I never heard that feedback. So every time that I talk to the manager about someone underperforming in their organization, I ask, have you talked to them about it? And the manager say, of course I did. And then I say, what exactly did you say? So I didn't ask, did you give the feedback? I asked, what exactly did you say? And then we unpackage this message, and I say, and do you think that the person heard you? Like, would you hear yourself in this message? And just, doing the surgery on the feedback message really helps. So situational, the power of context. This was a very long-winded way to answer your question. Why is the third of the feedback messages that doesn't land well? Either because the message is faulty or because we haven't taken the context into consideration.
Yeah, and another challenging aspect for giving feedback in big global companies such as yours, where people work under you from all over the world, is intercultural differences, because the kind of feedback that is more reserved would be more characteristic for, I don't know, maybe British people who like to be very careful with their criticism. And if they say something to you that may sound innocuous, it is, in fact, huge criticism, but you just don't understand it because they are not as open as, for example, Americans or maybe Russians. How to consider this aspect, the difference in cultural upbringing and mentality?
Indeed, you need to take culture into consideration. And we all heard anecdotes and stories with how this conversation takes place across the cultural context. We can talk about the Asian cultures where the concept of face is very important. We can talk about Middle Eastern countries where the message might be so convoluted that it's difficult to make heads or tails of it. Or you would have French, who are very famous for their very direct feedback. Or in Russia, if you don't hear any feedback, you must be doing well, which is not necessarily true. And actually, in most cases, it's not true. So the cultural context is very important, and we dedicated a whole section to that in our book. But the interpersonal relationship between the person and the manager is much more important. So if you have that relationship of trust with your employee, and if you make it clear that you care about their performance, their development, and their career, then the employee is willing to listen whatever message that you have to share with them. So once you have established credibility as a feedback giver, and once you've demonstrated that you really care about them performing better, then people can stomach whatever message, no matter how unpalatable it may be.
What would be your top points of advice for managers giving negative feedback? How to do it efficiently and not make it worse, not make the relations with the person worse?
First of all, be clear. Get into this mindset that you won't get performance better. You won't address a performance issue with just giving positive feedback. So negative feedback is your friend. Some psychologists, for example, Bob Hogan, and Bob Hogan is one of the most prominent psychologists today. he likes to say that the only useful type of feedback is negative feedback. So if you think about it, why do we typically fire people, or why don't we promote people, or why people are ineffective? Because there is something that gets in the way of their performance. And unless we show them what it is, and we know that in most cases people don't know what are the stumbling blocks in their performance, they will never know. Some managers claim, well, it's obvious, right? People must know. No. Only 15%, of us are truly self-aware. In most cases, we are not aware at all about our limitations, and we're not aware of what's going on and why we can't be more effective. So managers need to deliver that information to their employees. And often this is, call it negative, call it constructive, call it developmental feedback, arose by any other name. Just make sure that you understand that, hey, if you want to help someone perform, they need to hear what stands in their way. So that's first step. Get into the right mindset. The second, you really need to identify the key issue. As I said, feedback can be delivered on hundreds of different things. But what is the one thing that stands in your way? What is the one big stumbling block that you need to address? And do the marginal checks. As I said, is that thing likely to be improved? Can the person change that? Very often, you would be dealing with, let's say, junior people and say, well, you need to be more strategic. Well, strategy is something that gets developed at very high level. So if I go to an admin assistant and I ask that admin assistant is more strategic, is it fair to request that? Right? However, I can request that the admin assistant is more planful. And planning is a lower level competence related to strategic planning. So can I say that someone is more proactive, more planful, more organized, is better at time management? Absolutely. So make sure that that one thing is clearly identified and it's well calibrated, and it will really have this disproportionate impact on performance. And then get the message right. So preparation here is key. It's not pleasant to give negative feedback. It will never be. It will get easier with practice and with preparation, but those conversations are never the ones that you're looking forward to. However, whenever I have conversations with people and I ask them for examples of most developmental conversations that they've had in their life, or the best pieces of feedback, it's those instances of negative feedback. When people realized that they were doing something in an ineffective way, or when they were made aware of their derailing tendencies or behaviors that would be detracting from their performance.
You must be really great at giving feedback at workspace. Do those skills translate into personal life?
I don't know. You should ask my family members and my team.
But what do you think?
I think that knowing the theory and applying it well are two different things. And that's why education is one side of the equation and practice is the other side. What I can't afford, and we talked about authenticity already, what I can't afford is saying one things in these blogs or books and articles and doing something else differently. I will lose all credibility. People won't respect me. So actually going public with my take on feedback, with my ideas, mine and my co-authors, it's a public pledge. So now I can't backtrack from that. I need to preach what I'm saying, because that is the pinnacle of a personal brand, and that is consistency of what you say and what you do. So I don't know if I'm the expert. I don't know if I'm really that great at it. But what I do is I always try to apply these principles in how I deliver feedback and how I try to increase the productivity of those around me.
Okay. Well, unfortunately, we're close to the end of our podcast. But before we finish, I'd like you to suggest one major takeaway for people who have watched us or listened to this, because this podcast is also available on iTunes, Spotify, Deezer, and other podcasting platforms. So one main piece of advice from you on maybe giving feedback or moving in the current pandemic, what would it be?
The feedback has a tremendous power to raise not only performance, but also morale and engagement and overall well-being. We are living in a pandemic where chaos reigns, there is a lot of panic, there is a lot of ambiguity and complexity. Feedback can cut through that complexity. A powerful feedback message, and you will read about that in the book, consists of 3 steps. Tell me why it matters, tell me how I'm doing, tell me what I need to do differently. So the first step, tell me why it matters, really answers the question why it's important. And engaging people around the why and the meaning of what they're doing, the importance of their contribution. It's so easy now even to start doubting the importance of what you do and how important it is in the greater scale of things. So having those conversations with people increase clarity. So giving feedback on why someone's job is important and linking it to the new priorities and to the change in the business strategy, and then providing feedback in terms of, hey, you used to do X, it may not be as effective in these novel circumstances. So I expect you to do this instead. And these are the 3 steps of the feedback message. I explained why it's important. I told you what I've seen. And I provide you advice or my expectations around, okay, this is what you need to do differently. That gives people certainty. That shows them the bigger picture. And that helps them to deal with this pandemic. So actually, in these unprecedented times of people working from home, people working remotely, it's easy to distance ourselves and to give less feedback just because you have less face time. But you need to do the opposite. You need to flip the pyramid. So if in business as usual, you were providing X% of feedback, or you had X% of one-on-one engagement with your team members, flip that. And you really need to engage people on the issues of their performance, of their careers, and their development, because empathy is becoming a much more valuable and very scarce commodity nowadays.
Flip the pyramid. This has been Sergey Gorbatov. Sergey, thank you so much. I'm Greg Mustreader. See you next week.
Thank you. Bye-bye.